A lot of what we do here in the library is things with academic research articles, and we find them in our databases a lot of times. And what I wanted to do this workshop on today was all of the other really cool things that we have for doing research, and a little bit at the end kind of just for fun, and how that can fit into a bigger research picture, because academic research articles are really great, but they have a couple of things that make them not the sole thing you should probably always use for research. So let me work on moving to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about books. I know books might be what some of you most associate the library with, but I want to talk about why we have so many of them and what makes them a good tool for research. So books, you might not be able to see this unless you move the little panel of people to somewhere else on your screen, but books are often written for a less scholarly audience than an article, and it puts your topic into a broader context. So articles have this funny thing where they end up being incredibly specific. They are one literary concept applied to one literary work, and that might be helpful to you unless you're more concerned with the main topic, or maybe you haven't read that exact work. Books can be really great for that. And the content is chunked into smaller units like chapters or sections. So it isn't always necessary that you actually read the entire book to be able to legitimately cite it for whatever research you're doing. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the first cool tool we have with books that we also kind of have with articles, but it's good to see that we also have it for books. This is a record. So if I'm interested in this book, Breath by James Nestor, which is the new science of a lost art, you can see all of this information. Ooh, careful. I know if I move my mouse too much, you will start seeing my bar at the top and not be able to read it. But this record is what you see when you look up a book in Primo, and it has a lot of really important information in it. Sometimes we get really caught up with that thing up at the top, that get it option, how I can actually get this into my hands. But if you have a situation like this book where we don't have a print copy or an ebook copy ourselves, you'll have to request it from Summit or Interlibrary Loan, which will take a couple of days. And if you're not sure that this is exactly what you want, you can read down a little bit further in that details section and get those contents. You see that second arrow there. The contents is a name of all of the parts and all of the chapters. So this book, you can tell, has an introduction and part one, the experiment. That experiment seems like it says the worst breathers in the animal kingdom, mouth breathing, and other parts like that. So that might help you know, oh, is this actually about what I think it's about? And if you want some extra confirmation of that, you can read the summary a little bit further down, which gives you an overview of the whole book. And that's nice because then you know whether or not you actually want this book or another one. Another tool that books have is a table of contents that's similar to that contents that you saw in the record, a slide before, but it's a lot nicer when you can see it without all those dashed lines in the middle and actually see how the author wanted to organize the content. The parts now look different than the different chapters, and you can see it all together in one slightly easier to read format. Another helpful tool about books and finding what you need in them are indexes and control find. So this depends on which format you're using the book in. If you're using the book in print, you can use an index, which is at the back of the book. It lists all of the main concepts and people that this book is about. So here we have The Naked Roommate and 107 other issues you might run into in college. So if you're like, what is the issue I care about in this book doesn't have chapters in the same sense, you can flip to the back in the index and see, oh, looks like they do have something about bank accounts or body image or things like that. And then you can see exactly which pages that information is on, which is really helpful to, again, narrow in on exactly what about the book you're interested in. And if you're using an ebook instead of a print book, you can use Control Find. So Control Find is a computer shortcut where you can just search for exactly the words that you want, and you don't have to rely on an indexer to have indexed the term or the concept that you are most curious about. You can look for it yourself. You can see this search box here, and then you type in your concept and it shows you where it shows up and how frequently in different sections. And if you search for sports, then you'll see that sports itself becomes highlighted on the page when you go to the page that has information about sports. All right. Okay, now another fun thing, this only works for our print books for now, which is a little bit sad, but it's something called virtual browse. If you aren't actually coming into the library and looking at our books on the shelf, one of the things that you might miss is all of the related books that sit right next to it. That's what's really nice about Library of Congress or Dewey Decimal. Those ways that books are organized here put similar books together. So if you are really concerned about web usability and you want Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think, it might be nice to know that he has other books on that, and other people also have introductions to web usability, which you can see in this virtual browse. This virtual browse is at the very bottom of that record we were looking at before with books. But like I said, it does not show our ebooks, which does make it limited in scope because a lot of the books we have these days, especially the more recent ones, are ebooks. So don't use this as gospel, but it is a really nice tool if you're not actually looking at the books on the shelf. All right, so we have all these tools for finding what we want in any particular book, but what if you've already found a really excellent one and you want to find more like it? A really nice tool, also in the record, we're going to talk about the record an awful lot today, is subjects. Subjects are the ways that we organize the articles. So in the record, you can see that this book about long-term care and nursing has 3 subjects: nursing homes in the United States, long-term care of the sick, and nursing. So that's trying to tell you exactly what this book is about. And if you're like, I am very concerned with long-term care of the sick, and that's the part of this book that was so helpful to me, you can click on that blue hyperlinked term, long-term care of the sick, and then you get to see all of those search results that pop up with other books that have that same subject. So you can see maybe the second result here, what living as a resident can teach long-term care staff, the power of empathy to transform care. And then that takes you to the record of that book, and you have all of the same request options that you have with the original one, which is super nice. And that is one way that library research can be a lot nicer than searching for things on the free internet, because there you kind of have to just keep finding the next good thing over and over yourself with no tools to help you get here, versus using subjects can be very, very handy in finding something that's helpful for the same reasons that the first one was. Another tool you can use are the sources that your original book cites. So in addition to having something like an index, a book, an ebook, or a print book might have a bibliography. So if you read this book, Universal Basic Income, Pennies from Heaven by Paul O'Brien, you might want to hear where he got these ideas or how this relates to the bigger concept you're really curious about. And this one has a really interesting bibliography. It says right at the top, the most useful resource for further research on this topic in terms of books is probably Basic Income, an anthology of contemporary research edited by Carl Wiederquist and several other people whose names I will try not to murder. And it's really nice to have that title, because then you can type it into something like Primo and search for it. And I did that. And I searched for this book in Primo and it didn't come up. And that's an important thing to know about that main search box on the library website. It only tells you what we have and what our closest partner libraries in the Pacific Northwest have. It does not have every book that has ever existed. If you want to see every book that has ever existed, there is an option. It's linked right under Primo. You can see it. It's called WorldCat. And then you can actually see everything, but know that those things that are in WorldCat but not in Primo take longer to get to you. But it's nice because you would never have found this article searching in Primo, or this book searching in Primo, because it's not indexed there. And then you have options to request it. So you can see this book here, it says held by libraries worldwide. You could pull that record open, the WorldCat record, and then you would see an option to request it. Okay, so that's all I had on books. We're going to talk about background sources next, but does anybody have any questions about books before we move on? Let me turn screen sharing off for a second so I can see the chat. All right, those are just Kate in the chat. Anybody have a question about books?
Yeah, I do.
Hi, Terry.
Hi there. So everything you were talking about there, is that all? You started out by saying something called a record?
Yes.
Place, a tool, is everything like there, and where is that?
Yes. Okay, let's do a little bit of searching and actually go look at a record. I'm going to share my screen again so we can see that. I'm going to go back a couple of slides. Okay. Let's do the one with the record. Okay, so have it all linked here. So this record is in Primo. So you can see here is the title. Here is this information about how we would get it. You don't see the option to request it from Primo because I have not signed into the library yet. That's an important thing to know. More options arrive when you click that sign in button. But here we see that title, that author, those subjects, again, that table of contents, and that summary. Some of the things that we saw, we don't see without being in an ebook and going directly to the content itself. That pretty table of contents, the things like the index, none of that is in the record, but most things are. And so how did I even find this? Let me copy the title and show you from the very front side. We can go to the library homepage. This box here is Primo. I can put the title in here and click enter for search, but let me show you here. I was talking about WorldCat. This is where the link to WorldCat is. If you don't find what you're looking for in Primo, you run a search. Hopefully your book comes up at least pretty close to the top, and our book is here. And that's how we get to see this record. Does that make sense? Perfect. Anybody else have a question about books? Okay, well then let's jump back a little bit forward in this presentation and get to background sources. So this is a little helpful graphic that's going to go onto a LibGuide that I'm working on creating but don't quite have done for today, that gives you a little bit of a heads up and a hint on what kind of reference background source you might want to search given your certain need. If you need a definition of a word or a concept, that's a good time to check a dictionary, but not necessarily the kind of dictionary you first might think I mean, and we'll get into that a little bit later. synonyms, you might use the thesauri, a thesaurus, a singular one maybe. If you want an authoritative introduction to a topic, you can use an encyclopedia, an overview of a person's life or accomplishments. There are biographical dictionaries or full print biographies or autobiographies. Geographical information we're not really going to cover today, but that's maps, atlases, gazetteers, also helpful for certain kinds of research. Facts or statistics, there are printed versions, almanacs, fact books, yearbooks. We're going to talk about some of our database options for that today. And what has been written before about a topic. So things like bibliographies, indexes, and abstracts. Again, a thing we won't have too much time to get into today, but it's good for you to know that all of these things are out there and any of our librarians could help you find them if they're relevant to what you're doing. So why would I use a background source? Background sources are really great places to get started if you don't know your topic well, because they do a great job of introducing you to key issues. They're meant to be read by people who don't know a lot about the topic, so they make extra sure to cover all of the main things you might want to know about. It's also helpful for giving you definitive definitions to explain key concepts to other people. Maybe you're really sure you know what a word means, but then all of a sudden you go to write a research paper and you have to write out a definition, and all of a sudden you feel like you don't know anymore what actually it means. That's a great time to use a background source to get a definition you can use and feel confident citing. So the first kind of background source we're going to talk about today is an encyclopedia. And encyclopedias are similar to dictionaries, but encyclopedias are more about topics and dictionaries are more about words. That's kind of a funny distinction, and it doesn't super matter if you find an encyclopedia that's helpful or you find a dictionary that's helpful. That's great. Just know that both of them exist and do pretty similar things. The example one I have up here is the Encyclopedia of Women's Health, and it has lots and lots of entries, including this one on seasonal affective disorder. And the nice thing about that is that it also has on the side, you might not be able to see this again, depending on where your little bar of people is, but on the far right, you see things like related searches and related articles about concepts like light therapy and melatonin, which maybe you didn't know had anything to do with seasonal affective disorder, which is really nice that all of this information is wrapped up here. And you also see at the bottom this suggested reading section. So if you've read these couple paragraphs, you feel now like you have a good grasp on what seasonal affective disorder is, but you really want to dig in deeper. You can see this comprehensive textbook of psychiatry from 2000 will have more information to help you dig deeper into that concept. But I said encyclopedias are similar to dictionaries, and I want to show you a dictionary now so you can kind of see that. Dictionaries are not just for basic comprehension of English words. They can be, and that's helpful if you don't know the definition of a word. You can certainly use a dictionary for that, but there are other kinds of dictionaries as well that help you explain a word or phrase or concept, what it means in a particular context. So let's talk about that. So here is the definition of aliens from Chambers' Dictionary of the Unexplained. So that defines aliens as beings that are not from Earth and gives records about UFO sightings and how people have described aliens that they've encountered. And of course, this record goes on for, or this entry goes on for longer, but it's cut off for the sake of a slide. But there are other kinds of dictionaries. This is one you might have heard of before. This is the Oxford English Dictionary. If you were to look up this same word in the Oxford English Dictionary, you could see with these little red dots here how frequently this word is used. It looks like it's a more popular than less popular word. And you also can see the etymology or the history of the word and how it's developed. Specifically, exactly how this first definition, belonging to another person, place, or family, not of one's own, from elsewhere, foreign, how exactly that definition developed. And if you were again to open this entry more fully, you would see all of the other possible definitions and word histories of the word alien, which might be helpful depending on your context. Or even a third option you might want is something like this Bible dictionary here, which again defines the word alien as someone living in a society other than his or her own. And it talks about how the Bible uses the word alien and how aliens are to be treated, especially in the ancient Israelite context. So that's why you might not just want to check one dictionary, or you want to make sure that the dictionary you use is actually suited to what you're interested in, because you might find very different definitions with very different pieces of starter information depending on which one you use. Okay, now on to another one. And all of these reference sources start to sound the same a little bit, but they are a little bit different. So next we're moving on to handbooks. Handbooks are often produced by large research universities or prominent academic publishers, and they have essays on sub-issues within a big topic. And you can see that these handbooks can be on a really wide variety of topics. We have a handbook of modern censors, which is about physics, designs, and applications. We have a communication handbook, the handbook of conversation analysis, one on Shakespeare and one on public policy. So again, if you're trying to get an introduction to a topic, but perhaps a more thorough one on a not as broad topic, a handbook could be a really good option for you. And when we're done with background sources, if anybody wants me to pull one of these open to see what they're actually like, I'd be happy to do that. But again, like books, they have little chapters and sections within them on smaller issues within this broader concept. So biographies. Biographies are what you want to use if you need information, background information about a person, their life, and why they're famous and well regarded. I looked up George Fox in a couple of the biography resources that we recommend. The biography resources, I will admit, are a little bit hard to find at George Fox Library. We have them, but they're not in one prominent place. That's why, again, I'm working on that LibGuide to kind of draw them together so you have a little bit easier of a time finding them. The one I would most recommend is this Encyclopedia of World Biography online. That's the one on the left-hand side of your screen. I looked up George Fox just for fun, and it gives you some history of who he was in a couple of paragraphs, when he was born, when he died, what his occupation was, and then again at the bottom it gives you further readings if you want to read a whole book on George Fox and need more than a couple of paragraphs that this provides. Some free biographical resources that are good on the internet are biography.com, which has a little bit more of modern people, and InfoPlease biographies, which again has more of the same kind of coverage of Encyclopedia of World Biography, but a little bit less in depth. Though it does contain some fun facts trying to help us know that Quakers are not Shakers. You see down in that extra credit section telling us that George Fox is not the guy on the oatmeal canister. So that might be good if you were confused about that. All right, statistics. I told you we're not going to work through the print options for statistics today. We're going to look at one of our database options. The one I'm showing you here is Statista. We also have Reference USA that's linked there. Maybe my slides can also go with the presentation when Kate posts that up on the workshop page. So Statista, if I wanted to, what I did is I ran a search on contemporary artists in that little box on the left-hand side, and it pulled up 69 results about contemporary artists. I clicked on one of those articles there, and it pulled up that chart you see, leading contemporary artists from the UK as of June 2020 by auction revenue. And you see that pretty chart, it's all in the same blue. That's what Statista looks like. But I want you to know a very important thing. Statista didn't make that statistic. It organized it and made it look pretty. What you can see on the right-hand side of your screen next to that chart, it says that the source is artprice.com. And if you go even further down that, you see a blue hyperlink to the Art Price Report, 20 Years of Contemporary Art Auction History. And you see that this statistic that it made pretty there is on page 55. And you can click it, and then you see what's in your top right corner. You see the report in its full text, and you can see the raw data that went into making that statistic. So that's really nice if you find one small thing there. Again, how can I get to a bigger something that might be related to this concept I'm researching? And I think this is my last one. I'm going to cheat. Yeah, okay. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. The last kind of reference source that I think is really good for you to know about today are issue primers. So issue primers are meant to help you, again, get a background to a big topic and the history of it throughout modern time. So we have two databases that are really good for this. I know I said outside the databases, but a little bit you have to go inside the databases to find different kinds of things than research articles that you might have been expecting to find. So the one I have up here is CQ Researcher. We also have opposing viewpoints. And the issue here is Hollywood and COVID-19, kind of trying to predict how the pandemic is going to affect things like going to the movie. And you see that this is related to the issue tracker of television, which it has been tracking in some form or another since the 70s, when video revolution cassettes were really what was revolutionizing the world at the time. On the left-hand side of that CQ Researcher screenshot, you can see what kind of content is in this full report: an introduction, the current situation. It guesses a little bit about what the outlook is. It has, again, a bibliography, next steps, pros and cons, all kinds of things like that. And that other screenshot, you can see some of the hot topics that this database also covers. These kinds of primers tend to only be on the most popular topics. That's why they're not always the best. Things like handbooks and encyclopedias can be a lot more niche. An issue primer is not going to be. If most people don't care about it, there's probably not going to be a primer on it. But they're nice when they're there. So how do I find all of these background sources that you're talking about? The ones that are books, you can find in Primo, but a nicer way to find them is, this is a screenshot of the library homepage. If you click on that blue bar, kind of halfway on this, probably a third of the way on a real computer screen down thing that says databases, and choose that first option, all databases A to Z, then you can find a lot of these reference materials in two particular databases, Credo Reference and Oxford Reference Online, which you would then find just by searching under C or O, since you know the reference database you would be looking for. Then you can search for your topic in there. You also can search for your topic in Primo, and then you have a filtering option to filter down to reference entries and reference sources. But that search isn't entirely perfect. As you can tell, you have to check two boxes to find hopefully one of the same kind of thing you're looking for, which is why it might be worth searching in two particular places instead, which are designed entirely around these reference and background sources. Okay. That's a lot of things about background sources. Does anybody have any questions about those? All right then. I'll share my screen again. And we will move on to high quality internet sources. I know, a librarian suggesting you look outside of the library for things. It's a scandal in the making. But why we would look at sources that are in the internet but not in a library database, the reasons are pretty simple. our library only collects certain things. We talked about that before with Primo. We don't have everything that's out there. We are trying to suit the things that we think that you're going to need. That's what we try to collect. But we don't have everything, and it's good to look outside us if you're not finding what you're looking for. Also, if you're really interested in raw data, current events, or other authoritative organizations like a government or a nonprofit, that kind of information you are not going to find very easily, if at all, through searching in the library. So let's talk about a couple of the many, many kinds of sources you can find on the internet. We're certainly not going to cover the whole internet in the next 20 minutes. But a first good source for you to know about if you need, well, we just opened it for real. This is the United States Census Bureau. And you can find all of the information from different censuses in here. So that's a lot of demographic information about the United States broken down into very small groups. If you need it by county in a certain year, they have estimates and all kinds of information that I'm not describing all that in the census. That's really nice for that kind of information about how the country has changed over time or what it looked like in one snapshot of time. Another option from the Library of Congress, this is Chronicling America. And Chronicling America has a lot of US newspapers from 1777 to the 1960s. This is great if you're doing historical research and you're interested in what is out there. A lot of them are digitized. Some of them, there are only records about what newspapers existed. But when they are digitized, it's really nice because you can do that kind of controlled find search about the concept or the person or the topic you're interested in and see exactly where on the newsprint page that was talked about. Another good source are local newspapers like the Oregonian. I'm showing the Oregonian, but there are several others you could use as well. That's really good if you need very current information. That is something that's hard about research articles and research databases, is that the process that they go through to be as authoritative as they are takes a lot of time. So often they are maybe 2, sometimes even 3 years behind what's actually happening right now. So if you're researching a very current topic, you'll have to use things like newspapers and magazines that have a much quicker timeline for turning around information. So if you want to know about how many COVID vaccines appointments there are, please don't search the library database. It will not give you the answers that you want. So this is one I am really, really partial to. This is the Internet Archive. The Internet Archive, and I'm going to show you 2 pieces of it today. It has digitized books and the Wayback Machine, which is kind of a history of the internet. So first, let's talk about the digitized books. They use a really cool model that I'm not going to bore you with called controlled digital lending for why they are able to share books with you. It has to do with exactly how copyright law works, but they can share books with you in this very cool way because of a little bit of a loophole in copyright law. And so if you are looking for an ebook copy of a book that's a little bit older, you might not find that in the library because commercially available ebooks only have been around for not that long. So if you want something that's a little bit older, this is a really good place to see if somebody has scanned the print copy into the Internet Archive books. And you have the ability to check that out for free, either for an hour or up to a couple of weeks if it's something that a lot of people aren't using, which is a really nice thing to know about. The other thing that the Internet Archive has that I really love and use a lot is the Wayback Machine, that history of the internet. So it will show you what a certain website looked like at a certain moment in time. It's crawling the internet and taking pictures at all times, but not of all things, trying to show you what the internet was like because it's always changing. So you can see the Wayback Machine, that first one is Google in 1998. The middle one is what that same Google homepage looked like in 2010. And the bottom one is what it looks like now in 2021, which is very familiar to us, but may someday not be quite as familiar to us. This is a really helpful tool, maybe not always for looking at the Google homepage, but if you were like, that blog, it was so amazing, and now it's gone, someone has taken it down, things like that, you can find things that aren't up anymore by searching for them here. And like I said, it's not crawling everything, and not all of them are as well indexed by the day as Google is, but it can be helpful. Maybe a screenshot or two a year of a website can often pull you back to that one issue of the newsletter that they no longer think you care about, or things like that. Oh, another controversial one. Here's Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an encyclopedia that is editable by lots and lots of people, but it is really helpful. And I mean, a lot of us get our start in research here, and that's not a bad thing. If you want to know about Junia, the New Testament person, yes, you can and should look in a Bible dictionary or an encyclopedia, but if you want to run a quick search that doesn't require delving into a database, this is a good place to start. And if you want to know a little bit more about the credibility of a Wikipedia article, it's a little bit hard to see, but you see that can you guys see my pointer or not? Yeah, okay, kind of, okay. So you can see that I'm on article. If I switch to that second tab there, that talk page, it actually is the conversation that the people who are writing this article are having about it, about any controversies, about what they're choosing to include or not include and why. And that can help you have a little bit more faith in what you're seeing, because it is editable by anyone. But if you can see that there are a lot of concerned editors who keep checking to make sure what's on there is accurate and making specific strategic decisions about what to include or not include, you might feel a little bit more comfortable. And just like a lot of the other background reference sources we were looking at before, you can often see links to other sources that are a little bit more credible, have been through an editorial process or a peer review process if you do want to dig in deeper and you don't just need that introduction. This one is a little bit just for fun to end us, but if you are interested in movies, another high quality internet source is something like Rotten Tomatoes, which will tell you how popular a film is when it comes out, both what the critics think of it and what the general public thinks of it. It also tells you who the cast and crew is for the movie, both by picture, by character name, and by their real name. It's also nice because it links to the critics' reviews. So if you were in something like a film class and you wanted to analyze Parasite, Rotten Tomatoes would be a great place to go, because you could see who these top critics are and then click on their full reviews there, which will link you to the newspaper that published that review to begin with. Okay, any question about high quality internet sources? Like I said, I did not even begin to scratch the surface of those, but it's fun to see a couple and remember why they might be useful. All right, well then I'll do my last thing, which is to say I'm going to redeem the databases a little bit. I've spent this whole presentation talking about how you might not need them or might not need them in the same way that you thought you might. Let me show you what other kinds of databases we have. I know when you look at that list of 246 databases, it's really intimidating, and it looks like every single one of them is going to bring you to exactly the same kind of thing, and they're all going to be research articles. That's not true. We already found out that some of them bring us to reference sources or primers. But what other kinds of fun things might be behind those ambiguous, looking all the same database names? It might bring you to music. We have Naxos Music Library, which has classical music, jazz music, and spoken word that you can just listen to and enjoy. You can analyze it if you are a musician or just enjoy it as an everyday person. I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but the link to the guide to all of these is here, and everything in my presentation is also linked. It will take you right to the page where I was on, at least hopefully. Permalinks are great, but they're not always the most consistent. Here's Canopy. Canopy is one of our streaming video services. We do have a couple of others, but I wanted to make it big enough that you could actually see some of the things here. Films like Misrepresentation or historical perspectives on the Buddha and all sorts of things like that. It is a lot of nonfiction for the most part, but it can be a really good thing to pull out on a rainy Oregon day if you want something new to watch. Travel information. I know a lot of us aren't doing much traveling right now, but if you want to be dreaming about future travel, spoilers, then you might like this database we have called Global Road Warrior, which gives you information about a country, something I have New Zealand here, and it has everything from business culture to climate to how people communicate there, different recipes, human rights, holidays and festivals, the money they have, all sorts of information that might be helpful to you. If it's a country where English is not the main language, they also have some phrases that are helpful for travelers to know, which is really fun just to kind of see that kind of thing all in one place and then easily switch to another country. I know it can be very difficult to research a place if you're going on a trip there. So a lot of overwhelming information that exists on the internet. Also, if you really love birds, and we have some faculty members here at George Fox that do, we have Birds of the World, and you can go in depth and learn all about how to identify a bird, what the male bird looks like, what the female bird looks like, how it migrates, and everything about that, its endangerment status. And that's definitely a really fun one. Kate likes this one. She helps with our education students, and this is Tumble Math. So it has a lot of interactive kids books about math. You can't quite see it here, but if you look at that one screenshot that has the words, you can see that only a couple of them are highlighted. That's because the author is reading them out loud, and they're very engaging, and it's fun. Stacks of Trouble, even though it seems like it might just be a story about a child and dishes, is actually teaching multiplication, which is kind of fun. And if you have kids yourself or you babysit or anything like that, this could be a fun resource to pull out and help do something educational and a little bit fun. Less fun, but also very practical, is EBSCO's Learning Express, which has, in addition to a number of other things, test prep materials for grad school. So if you're interested in the GMAT, the GRE, the LSAT, the MCAT, the MAT, all of those kinds of things, there are both books and sometimes practice tests to help you with those, which can be really, really nice. And I believe, yep, that brings me to the end. So I will stop my share and again ask if anybody has any questions.
Hey,
Hi, Terry. Yeah.
Boy, no question. Just completed for this because I basically knew almost none of this. So thank you. You just opened wide what I thought I knew what a library was. Apparently I didn't. So this is great. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. All right, then. Well, if we, oh, Lori, I love the talk feature on Wikipedia. Yeah, it's definitely a really nice thing to kind of learn. Wikipedia is a funny thing. It is really helpful, but it has really strange rules. I was talking to my history students about this, but Wikipedia doesn't allow you to cite primary sources. So that can be a very interesting and tricky thing. There's some reasons for it, but it makes it a less helpful resource for history students than it might be, because it always has to link you back to a secondary source instead of a primary one, which can be a little bit funny. Well, if nobody has any other questions, Kate, do you want to pitch the rest of the workshops we have going on for this semester?
Sure. First, thanks, Jenny, for the excellent workshop today. And I will reiterate, if you walk away from this workshop and you go, oh man, I finally remembered the question I wanted to ask, you can always reach out to us. Library website has a help button in the same menu that has the databases link. You just click help, and there's an ask us form. There's also a research help link where you can get a hold of us. We do have, I meant to count this before I started talking. Yes, we have 3 more workshops available this semester, all taught by different librarians, including, actually, I think we're all in this room. Robin's teaching one and I'm teaching the other 2. So on different topics and slightly different levels of expertise, but all of them are designed to be sort of a refresher or an introductory course, sort of like this one was. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that list. If you're not already registered, please consider registering for the rest of these. If you need anything, your library is here to help. There was a lot of information in Jenny's workshop today, and we will be making her slides and this recording available on the website. Link is in the chat, and I can send that again. If you have questions, you can always email me. But if you have questions about this, especially relating to a particular topic, we would love for you to get in touch with your subject liaison librarian. And I can actually, let me go grab that link so you've got the research help. I keep talking about it. I could just send you the link, put that in the chat. We would love to work with you one-on-one and talk about anything covered in this workshop or other issues you may be encountering as you're doing research. So yeah. If nobody else has questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording and we'll close out the workshop for today. But thank you so much for attending. We're glad to have all of you.